The first thing that happens in an undisclosed asset or unreported income engagement is the attorney advising me that the client knows a lot about the case. You want to speak to him or her. The client is known as the whistleblower whose identity is disclosed, as opposed to some others. Before promulgating discovery, I like to talk to the client and find out what he or she can tell me. And through the 40 or so years I've been doing this, I found a lot of people who are very open to telling me about those things. To relay the kind of information a client will provide, I thought it would be best to give you a few anecdotes, which we colloquially call war stories, and one of which actually was an appellate case in which I testified, involving a client who told me about a secret corporation that her husband had set up in order to make some additional money from his job as a purchasing agent. So he worked for this large company, and they bought a lot of materials during the course of their, annually, and he was in charge of purchasing all of these materials. So he thought up a great scheme. Why don't I set up my own corporation, buy the materials with my own money, and then sell from my corporation to my employer? He made tons of money. The lifestyle of the parties reflected it. And once the client had told me that, and discovery was promulgated, and we found all the records relating to that particular corporation that was undisclosed to his employer, but certainly disclosed to his wife, we were able to take that into court and provide the judge with the appropriate testimony regarding the amount of cash flow that the parties had been receiving over the last few years, as well as the amount of their assets, the source of that, and so forth. And it really melded and became the most important aspect of the case. That's war story number one. There are many others. I've chosen a few that I thought were more commonplace. One other one involved a service business where there was a second set of books being maintained. How did I know about the second set of books? Well, in this case, wife, and it's not, I'm not trying to be gender biased or anything, but frequently it is the wife who brings in that information about the husband, but oftentimes it's the other way around. But in any event, in this case, she brought me a thumb drive, which had really the second set of books. It was a complete set of all the invoices sent to all the clients of the service business. And she said, look at this, 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 and this. She was involved in the business. She knew what was going on, and she was able to obtain the thumb drive from the business computer. And she actually directed me to those invoices that were most salient in the case. So I looked at those invoices and I saw, well, wait a second, here's one that the charge is $18,000, let's say, and the payments are in installments during the course of the job, and they turn out to be $18,000 of payments. Well, then I say, well, okay, that seems appropriate. Now let's see what the books show. Now, I'll talk about QuickBooks later, but and what they are and how we use them. But I did have access to the company QuickBooks file. And in their file, they had actually listed payments by client. So I could match up the payments by the client on these invoices with the payments by client on the QuickBooks. And guess what? Not all of the payments by the clients were shown on the QuickBooks. So it was relatively easy for me to summarize the discrepancies between the set of books that was being presented for IRS purposes and possibly also for marital dissolution purposes with the underlying second set of books. Yes, of course.
I want to say that if you hear from your client that the other side is not doing things correctly and this gets raised, I think you should expect that the other side is going to say your client knew all about it. One of the things I would say to you is that it may behoove you to document with your client that they need to disclose everything that they know about the subject, because in my experience, the clients are going to pretend they really don't quite know, but they know, and then later going to blame you for, oh, you didn't ask me that I had to disclose that with you when it comes out that they knew more than they did. So I would document with the client what they're telling you, that they have an obligation to tell you everything that they know. Tell them that you can spin it however you're going to want to, but document what they're telling you so that you don't get later blamed for putting them in a bad position, all because they didn't really tell you what they knew. Okay, and with that, we're going to turn over to the next subject, which is the nature of the business.
So in terms of the nature of the business, the examples that we have here, it kind of gets to size matters. And what I mean by that is typically if it's a larger company and they have more sophisticated accounting procedures, they have audited statements, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about is really not going to apply. In terms of the smaller businesses, these examples that we have here, one of the first things that I do with the attorney is to get on the phone with the attorney and the client and have an initial call as to what's the scope. What are the issues? What do we think is going on? Much to what Jack had talked about in terms of the client knowledge, try to get a download of all of that information. If the business is involved, some simple questions as to, what does the company do? Who are the customers? Who are the vendors? What does their payroll or their staff look like? Because oftentimes in these smaller companies, there may be something where one of the vendors is a company that's owned by a relative. Well, we want to know about that. We want to make sure that we ask for the right documents on that. If there's a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a mother, father on the payroll of the company, we're going to ask for payroll related information. So in terms of the nature of the business, I think one of the key things is to ask for almost a customized information or document request list. And Jack will talk a little bit about the types of documents, but it's helpful to understand what type of business it is so that you can work with the forensic accountant as to what information you're going to ask for. For example, if we look at beauty salons, well, in terms of beauty salons, oftentimes they have certain software that they use. And from that standpoint, you're going to want maybe an electronic copy of that software if you can get it, something that we can download as a forensic accountant into Excel and sort through. We may ask for information in terms of revenue per service provider, a commission scale, payroll information. In terms of a restaurant, very similar. There's oftentimes a lot of restaurants use the same software, so we may be asking for that type of information. When you get into software or electronic, I'll call it cash register receipts, that might be something where you actually, the software company itself will come out and do a download of that electronic copy of that register to see if that stuff's ever been tampered with. And that would be important information to know. Also, when it comes to restaurants, you may ask for purchase orders. You want an idea as to how much product is actually being purchased, because there's a lot of industry data in certain industries, this is one of them, where you're able to get information as to what those profit margins should be. So much like I think what the first panel had talked about was kind of doing a ratio analysis to kind of assess, hey, are there some red flags with this business? In terms of landscaping, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit later, but that may be something where you may need to get customer lists. You may need to look at certain bank records and deposit information to try to capture unreported income.